Hello, I'm John Sabatini. First, I'd like to apologize to Kate Kane and the other organizers of the conference. I fully intended to be there. Unfortunately, a family emergency meant that we had to cut our trip short and I couldn't be there in person. I was looking forward to seeing you all for the first time in a while in person, having discussions, and very much despite the fear that my spouse has of the somewhat 30,000 crocodiles that are supposed to be roaming the vicinity, the lovely area of Cairns, Australia. Now, on to business. This presentation is about the relationship of reading components to comprehension in college students. My co-authors, who you will occasionally hear during some of these slides, include John Hollander, Hallie Smith, Tanea O'Reilly, and a guest appearance by Daniel Feller, who worked on some of the profile work. So the context of the study is proficient academic reading, which is essential for post-secondary academic success. It's a construct developed in part by Joe Magliano and colleagues down at Georgia State. However, a lot of students enter college with a wide range of reading proficiencies. And the lower those proficiencies, the more at risk they are of academic failure. This is worse or more exacerbated by the pandemic, which meant that many secondary graduates really were not fully prepared for college. And yet, more and more, they are relaxing, at least our institution and others, relax some of the test score requirements to allow entry to students because they couldn't get tested and they really wanted to give them an opportunity to show what they know in college.
So with that context, I want to introduce SARA. So what is SARA? SARA is a reading diagnostic that consists of 6 subtests. 5 of the reading subtests are word recognition and decoding, vocabulary, morphology, reading efficiency, and sentence processing. Together, these 5 subtests take about 30 to 40 minutes. The final subtest is a traditional reading comprehension assessment, and that takes about 15 minutes. So let's go into a little bit more detail about what is SARA and what features it has.
That was Hallie Smith, graduate research assistant and project coordinator extraordinaire, telling you a bit about the SARA. A little bit more. It's web administered. There's immediate scoring on the platform. Each of the subtests takes only a few minutes each. That's with the K through 12. It probably is a little bit quicker with college students. There's multiple difficulty levels. There's many forms for repeated progress monitoring. And the platform is getting richer and richer in terms of its reporting functions, its aggregation, its following students over time. And we've been doing research with this in multiple populations for many, many years. So we have an IES project that's actually ending soon that has allowed us to look at the SARA across college readers and adult readers. And so far the results have been very encouraging. There are some issues with diff with some of the items with adults, but we've looked at the integrity of the scales. And although there's a little tweaking we have to do, they're pretty much still aligned well. The correlations, the reliability, and the distances between points on the scale seem to be holding up pretty well. But we were going to absolutely improve them in the next phase of the research. So let's talk just a moment about the comprehension measures we used. We used scenario-based assessment, which we developed as part of our Reading for Understanding K through 12 work. We've been adapting those or using those for adults, both learners, post-secondary and post-secondary learners. And on this slide, you can see some of the features that characterize the scenario-based assessment approach that differs from traditional multiple choice comprehension that you may have been used to in other, such as the Gates-McGinty. Very briefly, this slide shows you that in the multiple kinds of validity studies we've used with the GISA, the scenario-based assessments. It actually stands for Global Integrated Scenario Assessment, but we often call them scenario-based assessments these days. We were generally getting very good concurrent validity estimates along some of the sub areas that we care about with other tests, including the Gates-McGinty, as well as the component tests, which we'll be talking about again in a moment. And I'll blather on just another moment or two while you have a chance to look over the information on this slide that shows you the validity evidence we have been collecting so far with post-secondary level students. And there's some publications that are in print to back that up.
To explore the relationships between foundational reading skills and differing types of comprehension assessments in young adults, we recruited around 370 first-year undergraduates from 2 universities. Most of these students were enrolled in remedial English courses. These participants completed a form of SARA designed to target around an 8th grade reading level. They also completed 2 scenario-based assessments, one on the topic of hydropower, which required reading at a high middle school level, and one on the topic of women's suffrage, which required reading skills at an upper high school level.
So that first larger sample gave us a little bit of a surprise. I mean, I've been using the SARA in multiple K through 12, well, 3 through 12 adult samples. We always get a certain pattern of intercorrelations, and they were lower here. And if you look closely at, I don't know the display here, but if you look, you'll see there's a ceiling effect on the tests. So there was a lot of this sample who actually did very well on all the tests, but selectively, and I'll show you that in the profiles later. Definitely reduced the size of the correlations. The second institutional sample that we collected, the 95 students, actually showed us the very consistent pattern we've seen across so many samples before. High intercorrelations, a little bit more towards the ceiling, but that's still definitely in the expected range for the sample.
To further explore the data, we adopted a technique used by Scarborough et al. In 2013. First, we selected a cut score for proficiency. The cut score we selected was 270, given what we know about proficiency from samples of readers in grades 3 through 12. Now, this might not be ideal for college readers, but at least it shows us that these readers have a reasonable command of component reading skills up into secondary school. Now, after creating this cut point, we marked whether students scored above or below this threshold on each of the subtests. We then summed these across the subtests. So, for example, if someone was proficient on all 5 subtests, they would have a 5, or they'd be in group 5. Now, if they were proficient on 4 out of the 5 subtests, they would be in group 4, and so on. Now, this allowed us to look at the consistency of performance as well as profiles from different groups. So here's an example. This graph shows readers from group 3, or in other words, those who scored below the cutoff for 2 different subtests. Now, each individual line represents a single reader with the subtests on the x-axis and their scores on the y-axis. Now, if we look specifically at readers who scored below the cutoff for decoding, for example, we can begin to notice some interesting trends. So breaking this apart, we can see that there was a number of readers who scored below the cutoff point for word recognition and decoding, who had a high vocabulary score, as highlighted in the blue box in the upper left-hand graph, and then proceeded to have low sentence processing scores, as highlighted in the other blue box. And those readers are shown in greater detail in the bottom right-hand graph. There were other readers who scored below the cutoff point for word recognition and decoding, who also had low vocabulary scores. And these readers could be broken up into 2 different groups: those that proceeded to have a somewhat lower sentence processing score, as shown in the bottom left-hand corner, and those that had a somewhat higher sentence processing score, as shown in the upper right-hand corner. Now this is just an example of ways in which we can visually explore some of these profiles, and we plan to follow up these analyses with profile analysis or latent class analysis fairly soon.
What this shows is that the scenario-based assessments produced good distributions, whether we used the medium level one or the secondary level one, across both samples. So it appears that the scenario-based assessments were found to be challenging or well distributed across the ability levels of these college students. Finally, we ran multiple hierarchical regression with the two different groups. And again, consistent with the findings we found, we saw that there was a lower R-square explained in the college group with the ceiling effects, but a pretty robust set of relationships on the other group, other college. And again, a lot of but not all of the components stayed significant and added variance as we added them in this sequence.
To summarize our results, we found that many of the students in our early university sample showed foundational reading skill difficulties. One of our universities generally displayed stronger reading skills than the other, with many participants at proficient or even ceiling levels. However, due to these ceiling level performances, intercorrelations between reading skill scores were worse for the college with higher averages. This is true of both the SARA reading skills assessment as well as the scenario-based assessment. Further, we found that each reading skill measured by SARA uniquely contributes to scenario-based assessment scores, which provides validity to SBA since this pattern is also true of traditional reading comprehension assessments.
Okay, that was John Hollander handling the discussion slides, and prior to that, that was Danny Feller talking to you about the profiles. So next steps, we're continuing to refine. In fact, we think we have both a screening measure so that college students don't have to take all the tests if they're not at risk. We're building up the top part of the another ability level so that we're much closer to the proficiency level we think you need for college and the component assessment for those who were near ceiling. And we're looking at engagement, test anxiety, and metacognitive factors, as well as trying to build some scenario-based assessments that are really more post-secondary like. We think we can combine these all to help students at the college level and help instructors to help them. Thank you. Here are some folks to thank, and my co-authors as well. And I'm sorry we're not there to answer your questions, but please feel free to email us if you have any follow-up that you'd like to discuss with us. Thank you. Goodbye.